But you're a girl.
Are you lost, sweetheart?
You're perceived as a bitch.
You're no longer fuckable.
I would say I became most interested in design with, because I always liked theater and storytelling, but I'm a people pleaser and I like being sneaky and subtle with things and like a secret helper of stuff. So I like the supportive, subtle storytelling that design can do. The little things that up and make it a really clear and specific story. So, yeah.
And I started doing comedy when I was in high school because making people laugh got me attention. And then I really started officially doing comedy. My first job while I was in undergraduate school was at a Renaissance festival, which is all just about making people laugh. And that's really where I sort of cut my teeth on improv and comedy for 10 hours a day, pretending to be somebody else and being in entertainment. So that was kind of the beginning of comedy, but it was also, I think that Renaissance Festival was very movement oriented too, because you're inhabiting this person all day long. And in college, again, my movement teacher, a woman named Susan Kritzberg, that was the first time I'd encountered movement as an art form integrated with theater. And so she was the person who really got me started off doing that kind of work in movement. So that's how I came to those two things. Liking the feedback of people laughing when I said something funny is great. And then learning about physical theater when I was in college. And just being like, oh, that's cool. What's that? I want to do that.
My school brought a group down from New York City to do an unarmed stage combat workshop with us, and I had an amazing time and I really loved it, and I seemed to pick it up really well. So when I had an opportunity, probably a whole year later, to go to the Boyle stage combat workshop down in Louisiana, I was like, awesome, I seem to like that, let me go get some more of that. And while I was there, I met a bunch of people all in the room at the same time that did this professionally as their job. And I was sort of like, oh shit, like I didn't realize, I thought this was just a fun thing that you got to occasionally do in theater. I didn't realize this was a job. And the family aspect really suckered me in too, because theater is so supportive and so familial. And stage combat is like that as well, but even more so. It's just an incredibly supportive, kind, giving community. And so being at that workshop, I was really like, ooh, I want in on that. How do I go about doing that? And then just sort of very actively pursued it. I started getting my first couple of small professional gigs when I was like 20. So I've been doing this for 11 years now.
I was primarily an actor in my 20s, and then I worked pretty consistently as an actor, touring mostly with Shakespeare. And I worked with a company that we had a very organic way of working where we all had a hand in creating the work. So I enjoyed that. But I always considered myself to be an actor and not someone that would ever consider directing or take on a leadership role. Then I got into my 30s. I had sort of been the resident ingenue for a company at that time. I think that word is going away. I'm hoping it's going away in this idea of type. But when I was coming up, it was definitely a thing. And so I worked, when I was younger, I worked a lot. And then as I started to get into my 30s, I kind of started to age out of this type, or younger people were coming up underneath me and they would get the roles over me. So I found myself in this place of, I've devoted all of this time and energy and focus to this and money and training in this career. So, what can I do? And I was interested in teaching, but I was afraid because I had been doing a lot of teaching artist work, which I enjoyed, but leadership really scared me because I was so used to having a director guiding me or a teacher guiding me. So I started trying to figure out ways that could improve my teaching. And I decided to go back to graduate school for directing so that I could direct and teach on a collegiate level. But it was really scary. I mean, I was not I went back to grad school at 37, so I was definitely one of the oldest students around, and I had to ask much younger students for help with all the technology, and it was very different. And I was really pretty terrified for the first couple of years because I just thought, this is crazy. This is not my personality. This is not what I do. The directors I had worked with, or not all of them, but a few of them had guided and led and directed in a way that I didn't think I was capable of. And then I really started to find my own voice as a director, and that blended into the type of teaching that I was doing. And then I started to get more and more confident and thought, yeah, this is my new passion. I love acting and I enjoy acting and I get to do little bits of it, but not as much anymore. And because you kind of just find yourself going, I don't know where I fit. But I have to say, if I had the choice now between taking a directing position or a teaching position versus an acting job, I would choose the directing because it's I really enjoy the collaboration with actors, and having been an actor, I love having that perspective and approaching the directing from an actor's point of view. I love this question because I think about it a lot and I don't know how I struggle with it a lot because it is directing is still and has always been a very male dominated, particularly straight white male dominated profession. And
my experience in the professional world has been that is the work we do in theater and film and television, whether it's heightened work like movement or just straight up and down Law and Order, whatever you're being cast at, is that we're very still supplicant to the male gaze.
So I would say I don't feel like I've experienced sexism from the SAFD itself. As I've been training and as I've been coming up through the ranks, I've felt very supported the whole way along. And where I do often run into sexism, though, is out in the professional theater world.
But there's certainly a gap. And as someone that's a woman, and particularly someone that's still young in the industry and someone that is on like the smaller stature side.
Which means that mostly men are in charge, and mostly what men look to women for is, are they attractive? And we're talking straight, hetero men. And even I think there is a tendency sometimes for queer men too to look at women as just, are they pretty?
And to a degree, especially when I was first starting out, there was always an element of, is this happening because I'm a woman, or is this happening because I'm so young looking? Or is it a combination of the two?
As opposed to, are they funny? Are they smart? What is their essence? What is their energy? Which is how men are looked at.
And as I'm aging and some of it is lingering, it's easier to go, okay, so this is just because I'm a woman that you're being a turd in this moment.
When you are no longer fuckable, and again, we go back to the male gaze, right? Then you are put literally in a little rowboat and off you go into the sunset, never to be seen again.
I've been called like honey and sweetheart and yeah, and some of that was Midwestern charm, which I can also understand in like the South.
I'm from the South. I'm sort of, genteel, I guess. And I'm very similar to my mother, who's wonderful and warm. And I think that I struggle sometimes with taking control of the room if I really need to.
I certainly surprise people by how much I fill a room, either with my voice or just like confidence. And sometimes I overcompensate, I think, for it in order to like, yeah, I'm the real deal.
But if you try to take control or be assertive, people will, pardon my words, but you're perceived as a bitch. And that's very frustrating to me. I know some women directors who have a reputation for being a bitch, and that's not what they are. They're doing their job.
And when it's more subtle or when it's unconscious bias and when you're running into behaviors that are harder to pinpoint, it becomes more difficult. So then there's also a degree of, is it useful for me to try to discover if the root of this disrespect is gender-based, or is it just useful for me to nudge the behavior in the direction that I need it to go and set clear boundaries and be clear about what the expectations for the room are and for behavior while we're in the room.
There's a notion in the industry, or at least when I was in it, is that women are not funny. And so what they would usually put in as a placeholder in comedic parts would be quirky people, right? Quirky. And there's nothing wrong with being quirky, but it's different than being funny.
I would say I don't usually encounter blatant sexism, with a couple notable exceptions. Like I was working in a theater and we had a leak in the ceiling, and they sent a maintenance guy in to check it out, and it was a really, really high grid that you had to put a harness on for and clip in while you ascended the ladder because it was so many stories up the ladder. And this maintenance guy was like, oh, I'm going to call my buddy. I don't want to go up there. And I was like, oh, I could just climb up and take some pictures for you. And he was like, you would go up there? And I said, yeah. He went, aren't you afraid of heights? And I said, no, I love heights. And he went, but you're a girl. And I was like, wow, like, how cartoonishly, it was like so cartoonish that I didn't even get mad in the moment because I was so taken aback by it. And I was just like, no, man, like I climb trees, I rock climb, I work on ladders, I do aerial performance. I love heights.
Some of the most famous women on television doing comedy were like Mary Tyler Moore show, Beautiful Woman. Mm-hmm. She was really actually very funny. Golden Girls, great example of funny women who kind of, that show really broke the mold in a way, right, of women being funny, and they were older, not just older, but old, and really centered around them. So that's a great example of that changing dynamic of allowing, and Roseanne, that show was on around the same time.
Lighting, though, because of focus, like you interact with the electricians a lot. Granted, it's only for like a day or two or something like that. It's a shorter period of time. It's really condensed, but you spend a lot of time with them. And so I was an assistant at Milwaukee Repertory Theater, and it's a bunch of like middle-aged men, and that's it. And so I remember as like the intern that like walked around and worked on every show. I got like, "Are you lost, sweetheart?" I was like, "No, I work here. I'm handing you your paperwork."
I always worry. I'll say this. I feel like my husband, who I love, is very wonderful, and he also directs and teaches. If he says something to a room that is warm and inviting and sort of gives a compliment or is extraordinary, and he is collaborative, but which is just in his nature, it seems exceptional, and it's treated as, oh, he's different because he's this way. Where for me, I feel that it's expected because I'm a woman.
So, but I think that those forces are still at play.
So when I was just getting started at the time, there was only one fight master who was female, and it's this really lovely woman, Kay Jenny Jones, who's based out of Cincinnati.
Absolute brilliant individual. Her name is Sarah Maines, and she's the head, she's now the chair of the theater department in theater and film at Texas State University.
And she is just a really cool presence and has been a help over the years. And she actually got into stage combat because as a young woman, she was in a show where they were really slapping each other. And her coworker hit her in the ear, and she's got permanent hearing loss in that ear, and sort of went, okay, well, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Before she was the chair, she was the head of the MFA design program, and specifically lighting design. And any attributes that people like about me here as a faculty member, I have entirely been inspired by her. She's a genuinely incredible human being, and a superhuman. She runs marathons and has 2 children, and a genuinely incredible human being. And also an awesome designer. She associated for Jersey Boys and In the Heights, and yeah, she's a brilliant lighting designer, and by far one of the best theater educators I've ever worked with.
And we harp on representation matters all the time, but it was so cool to have her walk into the room and be like, oh, I want to be that when I grow up. There it is.
No, it was really cool to see someone that I could actually see myself becoming, and did that. So yeah. She's cool.
Well, if I go back to that Renaissance Festival, that sort of first job I had, and I worked there for 5 seasons, there were a lot of funny women there, and we all kind of bonded together, and we're actually 30 years later very good friends. And they're all incredibly funny, incredibly talented, make their own stuff. And I know those aren't famous people, but those are incredibly influential on my life and my way I think about myself as a person who has my own agency, right? Oh, I can be funny. Everybody around me is doing this, and they're far funnier than I. So I was always trying to play up to them, match them.
Ariane Mouchkine, who's a French female director. I love her work, and she talks about theater being a ritual instead of a production, and I love that idea of ritual, and I think that's what drew me to theater in the first place, that it was a safe space to go to, and also a brave space, and a place where I felt like I belong. And so when she speaks about it in those terms, I love, and she does a lot of experimental theater and experiential, where you get into an environment and she builds this whole world, and I think that's fascinating.
But I have to say, in all my training, there were very few women who taught movement. In graduate school, my teacher was a man. All the extra training I've done with Offner Eisenberg, with everybody, Giovanni Fusetti, all the extra training I did, all men.
When I was training to get my master's in directing, I was never given the opportunity to assist a female director, which I thought was a real shame.
No, and I'm not saying there aren't other women in the field. Dodi DeSantos is really big in the movement field, but I only know of her, and we have only spoken over email. I've never worked with her or studied with her. She's very influential in the field, but she has not been my teacher, and I've only, other than Susan, encountered male teachers, which is a drag, but I think that's changing and shifting.
Most of my work was female-driven work, and plays by Carol Churchill and Kate Hamill and Sarah DeLapp, and that became my mission. And mostly my thesis was roles for women written by women. And I found it strange that I left having only assisted men and having generally negative experiences. Go get my coffee, go pick up my dry cleaning, drop me off at the bar, not utilizing my ideas in the room. And so that being said, I did have the opportunity to collaborate with just recently a female fight choreographer and female intimacy coach.
So the people I always look to for inspiration in the field of movement were pretty much always men, unless they were my peers. And then there was a lot of women amongst my peer group, but not in the sort of upper echelon of either comedy or movement, unfortunately. Agency, 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 agency. Make your own work. Feel like your own work, your own creativity, your own voice has meaning and power, and that is where the essence of your work always lies, whether you're performing someone else's words or you're making your own stuff. I think you should always be making your own stuff. It's a way to have longevity in this career, and it's not even just a career, it's a life. And the life you want to make for yourself, to continue to express and explore and share your voice. It needs to be heard. It's imperative.
Keep like their independence as artists. You know, I don't want to make like 5 like mini Annalises that'll graduate from here. The world can't handle that. And that's a disservice to who they are as an artist, right? So art is like super subjective, and so a lot of it is just finding their voice as an artist. I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't consider myself like a computer savvy person. And so you don't need to understand technology to be a lighting designer. You just need to like understand like art and how light plays with it and stuff. Or storytelling. That's about it.
And that's how we make new, exciting things. And that's what I'm always striving to do, is to not to impose myself or my style or form on students, but to help unlock their style.
I always make sure, even if it's a very short class, that I do my actors and safety lecture, which goes through like, how do I tell if the sword or the knife I've been handed is safe? Who do I talk to if I have a safety concern about my prop? How do I bring up safety concerns to my fight director? What is the chain of command at a theater if my safety concerns aren't being taken seriously? And when should I maybe consider walking away from a job, and how would I walk away from a job without hopefully burning bridges?
We're in the business of empathy, and that's the thing that I think drew me to the art form in the first place, is that I always loved as an actor stepping into someone else's shoes and seeing things from their perspective. And I thought that there was sort of a release in it. No matter what kind of character it was, I always learned something from it. And I love watching actors make those discoveries and then sharing it with an audience, because I think we are teachers to our audiences, because we're sort of, holding the mirror up to nature and showing them some piece of themselves. And it's always my hope that when someone leaves the theater of a play that I've been in or assisted in some way or directed, is that they learned something new or connected with a character in some way, or went, oh gosh, I'm happy that's not my life, but or I've got a new perspective, or oh, that makes me think about that time when. So I think that it connects us in a really beautiful way.
And I would say my secondary but still very important goal is I want people to leave, especially my stage combat classes, but really any class, just feeling like they're a badass and feeling like they're competent and feeling empowered to go out and make whatever kind of art they're going to make and be whatever kind of artist they're going to be. So those are I would say my 2 primary goals, is I want you to be safe and I want you to leave here feeling like a confident badass.
And I try to run my teaching classrooms the same way, as well as rehearsal rooms, that I feel I want everybody's voices to be heard. Everybody's coming from a different place and brings different ideas. And so it is really a collaborative, playful, ritualistic vibe. That's the environment I really tried to foster, and the culture that I strive to create.
I identify as a demigirl, so I'm both female and agender, is what that means to me personally. I'm also asexual, and I'm in a little bit of a privileged position with both of those identities, in that I am a member of the LGBTQ+ community, but neither of those things are necessarily apparent just from looking at me. So I'm privileged in that I can choose when and how I want to share that information, and I can choose when and how I want to engage, as opposed to if someone is actively in the middle of transitioning, they may be getting lots of questions all the time, or experiencing lots of negative behaviors all the time, and getting into education fatigue because they're not actually in control of opting in to whether people notice that about them or not. And now that I'm a little older, and in particular now that I'm working with so many young people and having conversations with so many young people, I think the opposite is true, because of the representation angle, where even though I don't need people to treat me differently because I'm a demigirl, knowing that I'm not cisgender could be really helpful for a young person in my class. I'm finding more ways of sort of sprinkling that information in and getting it out there as I age, purely because I'm starting to recognize that there are a lot of young people out there who need to see an older person or a professional that they can look at and go, oh, they're like me. And now I feel better about my future because I've seen someone that looks like me that's doing this.
So my favorite, I have many favorite projects. Every project is special. Every time I step into the role of directing a new project, there's a whole process with it. I make a book where I glue the pages into the script. It has this whole kind of, I make my own script and I really delve into it. And so it becomes a part of you, and I really enjoy living with it and thinking about it. And when I know a project is coming, I get so excited because I know that I then have this creative outlet at any point in the day that I can think about when I kind of need that, or I get an idea all of a sudden in October that comes into play in April. So that's really such a great thing.
I think my most successful project to date, or satisfying project to date, is my one-person show, Fury. I always tell people, if you want to know anything about me, watch my show, and pretty much everything about me is in the show. I think I'm funny. I think I'm also very sincere. I have big feelings about the world and my place in the world. I have a lot of conflicting feelings in myself about who I am and how my voice is heard. I'm very female identified, but not in a traditional way. I felt very hampered throughout my young career by my body. And so to put that suit on, which I feel free in it, like I don't have to worry about my stomach, my boobs, my feet, my legs, my skin, my eyes, my hair, nothing. It's all gone. It's all replaced with this character. And that's all I ever wanted to do as an actor. I just want to be characters and embody characters and tell stories and interact and be with the audience.
I mean, I will say that my recent favorite is my most recent project, which is Romeo and Juliet. I think that it's the first I have so much experience with Shakespeare and I teach it and I'm passionate about it, but I've never directed it. When I left grad school in particular, I was really disappointed that I never got to direct a Shakespeare. And so when the Department of Theater and Film asked me to do one, they asked which ones, and so I sort of said, these are my few favorites, but Romeo and Juliet is quite perfect. And I have always wanted to direct it and have a long history with it. So I was really excited to dive into it. So I really thought that we had a really nice balance of movement work, ensemble work. I love the style of the piece, and I just thought everybody really embraced it. It was a very ensemble driven piece, open-handed, where we're kind of, we're coming back to the theater right now still. And so it felt like a love letter to the creative process. And hearing young actors who some have had some experience with Shakespeare, some hadn't, some had a passion for it, but never had a chance to perform it, to watch them discover and live in that language and tell the story and be so excited about it. Because sometimes I think you say you're doing Shakespeare and people go, oh, I don't want to do that. And instead it was the opposite. There was so much energy, so much passion. There were so many ideas in the room. There were general excitement about characters. We had a really great, cutting of it that was fast and passionate and furious and funny. And I just think that we found a really nice balance. And I thought the script really came to life. And then every time I sat and watched it, I just thought it was so beautiful. The actors really took it in the end. And it was, the foundation from our design team was incredible. And then they just really lived in it and made it come to life. And the audiences seemed to love it. So for me, it was a quite perfect process and product.
And to me, it is a milestone in my life, because it has freed me in a way that I could not find within the traditional industry of auditioning for parts and playing the characters that other people saw me as. One of my favorite moments from working on that show, one of my best friends who I met doing Importance of Being Earnest, came to see the show, and afterwards we went out to eat, and she was like, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you did that. I was like, that's what I do. Like, that's my thing, more than straight acting, which I love. But this is like my special thing. And she's like, I never knew that about you. And this is a woman who I stood up for in her wedding. And her child's godmother, we're close. But she did not know that about me. And I think the industry has space for innovation and the unknown, but you kind of have to push your way into, you have to make the space for yourself. And so I felt very proud of making my space. It took me a while, but to finally be like, oh, there it is. There's the thing that I feel most at home in, and like I can do it and matter to myself.
So one of my favorite projects was actually back in grad school. We did a show called The Fights Before Christmas, and in the first half of the year in the fall, we all went to a coffee shop together twice a week and wrote it together. Each person, it was essentially a sketch comedy show that was incorporated a lot of stage combat and was Christmas and holiday themed. And it's just one of the most fun shows I've ever worked on. It was insane. It was just the most fun I've ever had being on stage. We were all so excited to be there every night. The audience was a total riot every night. And it was so funny, and it went so well, and there was so much sword fighting, and it was just the best time. And then I would say, other than that, I'm generally most excited by new work, by like weird little indie projects, or I've recently started doing a lot of work with a theater in Boston called Fresh Ink, and they only do new plays, and they highlight playwrights who are artists of color, or who are women, or who are trans or non-binary, and they encourage their playwrights to write characters that are women or people of color or trans or non-binary. And so that's been really cool. It's a cool mission. And the scripts that I've worked on with them have just been wild. I've done 2 with them this year. One was called Shrike, and it's set in the not too distant future in a world where aliens are actively taking over and we're losing. And the whole show takes place in an old public bathroom that's been repurposed into a field hospital for the rebellion. And there were alien characters, and there were firearms, and there was stage combat, and there was a non-binary character, or a couple non-binary characters, one non-binary human. And that was a really fun time. And I've got a show that's opening actually Saturday that I've been Zooming in occasionally to do some touch-up rehearsals, and that one's called Truth or Consequences. And the setup for that one is there's 2 agents of a secret government agency that works on suppressing and capturing cryptids and monsters. And they show up in this motel room. There's only a single bed, and they have a whole argument about how they should have been booked into 2 different rooms. They come to an agreement. They decide to drink some fancy alcohol that one character has. He leaves to go get ice, and he opens the door, and it's a brick wall. And then he opens the window, and that's a brick wall. And they're like, uh-oh, what the hell is happening? And the phone rings, and it's their boss. And their boss is like, surprise, you're at the Eldorado Motel. We've been after it for like 20 years. It is a cryptid, and your mission is to kill the hotel before it eats you. It's carnivorous. And that all happens in the first like 8 minutes of the play. That's like the setup for the rest of the show. It all takes place in this one motel room. And we've got all these tentacle puppets, like tentacles erupt out of the wall and from under the bed, and they're doing stage combat with each other and with these puppets, and the walls bleed, and it's just insane. They kick a television. Yeah, I'm so interested in new work. I'm so much more likely to read a script and be like, I'm really excited, not about the people I'm working with or about the production values or any of that, but just about the literal script. I feel like I only really get that with new works.
I worked on a Lynn Nottage production called Intimate Apparel, and it turned out really stunning. The story was just really beautiful, and the way all the elements came together to tell it was really beautiful. And that one was just extremely satisfying. And the director for that show, she's a very strong, independent woman. She had which I appreciate this, but she has like no hesitation with like stating her mind or what she needs or anything like that. Very blunt. And so people were really thrown off by that at first. But I like really respected it and thought, especially for the cast and all of the individuals in the show, it was really empowering. It was interesting because I was the only student designer on the whole thing. Everyone else was a faculty. And so it kind of like ruffled their feathers too, with just like her really dominating and confident approach to things. But I thought it was cool. There are a few times, I'm a perfectionist. I struggle with I struggle with like depression, OCD, and anxiety. And so there are very few times I'm like artistically satisfied. And that was one of the few times where I was like found some artistic satisfaction.
I'm still working on it a lot myself, and every process I learn a little bit more about how the next time be sure to take these steps, be sure to behave in this way. And I don't mean be a lady. I mean ask for what you want.
Young women, and I'll say young is just maybe just women who don't think they have enough experience yet to like fully sit at the table, which I would advocate that they do. I think everyone's welcome at the table at theater. It's just different kinds of tables.
Wherever you are, learning to be more inclusive. Inclusion makes diversity. Inclusion makes equity. The more people we include and draw in. So I'd say to anybody, trust your voice, trust your gut, stay in artistry, surround yourself with people who are like-minded and lift you up. And people who drag you down or harm you, get rid of them immediately and walk away from them. Offer them the grace of your understanding, but move away.
It's almost more useful to act as if everything is fine for you and to just go out and do your work as well as you can and work on projects that you like and work with people that you like, because you sort of can't, there's not enough time in the day, there's not enough effort in the world to account for everything or to try to catch things beforehand. And at some point you just have to sort of go out and do the job and deal with things as they come in rather than expecting and prepping for things to be bad.
It seems to me that in a collaborative environment, people respond really well with someone saying, this is what I need, and that this is what I want, this is what it needs to be, this is the story I want to tell.
It's feeling confident in your place and knowing that the beautiful thing about theater ideally is that it's all like a shared unified goal.
If you're a man working in the field, recognize that these are still problems that are happening and recognize that you have a voice and an ability to be helping fix this and to be bringing up other people and to be pushing the industry in a different direction and be making different choices.
When you ask, do I have advice to young women? I would say I just have advice to humans.
Be direct.
Go into those companies and those schools and those theaters that you care about and see if you can affect some of those positive changes that you want to see.
And so you've got a team supporting you and you're making something bigger than yourself. So you don't have to worry about like taking it on all by yourself.
Don't burn out. Be mindful of burnout. But the time has come, the time is now, and we can start making some of these changes.
Ask for what you want. Consider yourself, and I think that is just as important as what other people need. It's about taking up space. Physically, yes, but also vocally and with your ideas. That I think that there is space to be had.
Be with people who make you feel awesome. Those are good friends. Those are good colleagues. Those are good co-creators. Women are not funny.
Take a look at me.
What?
She was really actually very funny.